Okay, what I'm going to do in this part of the video is to explain to you the proper way to fiberglass one of your coupler tubes or your main tube, your payload section, whatever. It's very, very important that your measurements and your preparation is correct. Now, when you get the fiberglass cloth, depending on the thickness or whatever, it might come in a large roll. It's obviously going to come in a bigger piece than what you need. Now, for instructional purposes here, what I did was I already pre-cut a piece that's going to be a little wider than the tube that you need, and I already measured the distance you're going to need to make your overlap. And it's kind of important. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you what you're going to do first. You're going to cut your piece that you're going to need to cover. For purposes, I took a piece of coupler tube. Usually we're going to do the outer tube. We're not going to do a coupler, but I got this anyway for now. So I made sure that it's a little bit wider than what you need, and I pre-rolled it to make sure I have the correct length, and I would say it's probably going to be about an inch or two overlap. And you don't want your overlap more than that, but you don't want it too narrow neither, and I'll explain to you why a little bit later. All right, now we have the fiberglass mat laid on a nice flat surface. It's all cleaned, all the excess material is off it. She's pretty much ready to go. Now normally when I do it, I would roll it this way, but in order for the camera to see what I'm doing, I'm going to be rolling it this way, and then I'll explain why. Now, your tube. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your tube prepared. If it has any type of, which I had mentioned before, it's called glassine. It's a very waxy type material that they put on the outside. You have to sand that. Very important. Sand it down, get it all nice and clean, and get it prepared before you go to the next step. Now, I'll show you what the glassine looks like. This is a motor tube, has the same type of material on it. You can see it's a very, very shiny substance on it. If you try to spray your adhesive and then wrap the tube with it, it's not going to adhere correctly. So what I would suggest is prepare properly first. Very, very important. Okay? So we're going to go back. We're going to pretend this is a body tube. It has the glassine type material or whatever on the outside. Sand that off, get it nice and prepared. The next thing you're going to do is you've already have your material measured out. You know how much you got. It's all ready to go. It's on a nice flat surface. It's nice and straight. There's no ripples in it. It's ready to go. Now we're going to take our body tube. We're going to spray it with an adhesive. I use the 3M Super 77. Really good stuff. Wherever you spray this, it doesn't come off. Okay? So be careful when you spray these. Go in a ventilated area, lay some plastic or cardboard down, spray your tubes. If you want to do it one at a time or whatever, come back in and do it. Don't spray this material where you're working, folks, okay? It's very hard to get out. Plus it's got pretty flammable vapors. We don't need you exploding. Okay, so now this is sprayed with the material. We sprayed it. It has to sit between 30 seconds to 30 minutes. That's its working time. So you get it. Now you have it all, you have the adhesive on it. What you're going to do is you're going to come over, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this material this way so you can see what I'm doing. Okay? We would start on this end here, and we're going to start right in the middle of the tube. We're going to lay it in the middle so we have an overlap on each end, and then we're going to begin to roll. But I'm going to do it from the other side so you could see. Now, mind you, this does not have the adhesive on it, so the material is not going to stick to it, but I have to do it this way so I could explain why. Okay, we would come down here, we'd make sure it's nice and straight, we'd begin the rolling procedure. Now obviously it's not sticking to it because there's no adhesive, but if it did, this is what would happen. We would roll it, and we would get to this point right here where our overlap is. Now, this is going to be all secured down nice and tight. You're going to get your spray adhesive and just spray a little piece in here, just a little bit, so that when you continue to roll, okay, you can continue to roll, you're going to make sure there's no bubbles or anything in it. It will make the gap, and it will cover it up, and you'll be done. Now, obviously, when I unroll it, nothing happened. But I'm going to go get one that's already done, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's rolled and the adhesive is on there. This is a body tube that's been rolled, and I'll put it close to the camera so you could see. That's where your seam is, right in here. Okay, it's probably about, I don't know, an inch or two long. That's your seam. Okay, and the rest of the tube is all adhered down very well. Now it's to the point where you could trim off your excess over here. You want to leave a little bit of extra. Don't cut it down to the edge of the tube. Leave yourself a 1/4 of an inch, a 1/2 an inch, and we'll trim that off later. On both sides, on all your tubes, that's done. So now all the body tubes at this point are ready for the epoxy process, which I'm going to do in another part of the video. But I wanted to get this first. Very important. Preparation, very important. Make sure that you cut your cloth that you need. Make sure it's all nice and straight so that your seams and your gaps are all pretty uniform. Again, if you look in this video, you'll see, it might be hard to see, there's a gap in there, and it's pretty consistent from top to bottom. Okay? That shows you about the width that you're going to need. Now, when we get into the epoxy process, this gap is going to be a little higher than the rest of the matting because it's thicker. It's double. We're going to sand that. I'm going to show you how to do it, and we're going to get most of it out. It's never going to be perfect. You have to understand that. This is the old-fashioned way of doing it. If you were vacuum bagging or if you were putting a sock over it and doing it that way, you wouldn't get that. But if you do it this way, it's cheaper, it's stronger, and you'll get most of it out, a little bit of sanding and filling. I'm going to start this instructional video on how to wrap and, at this point, fiberglass and epoxy your matting onto the tubing. The materials that you're going to need to do this are quite simple. The most important thing is make sure you have a very good quality epoxy, which I have pre-mixed right here. This is the West Systems. I have the Slow Cure, which I like to use the best to do this type of application. It gives you plenty of time, mixing time, pot life, and so on. As far as your other materials, do not use anything high quality, because when you're done with it, you're going to throw it away. Nitrile gloves, a paintbrush, and what I like to do with the paintbrush is to cut about a third of it off to get somewhat of a little harder bristle, but not super hard. When you buy them, the throwaways look like this, and when you're done, you cut them with a scissors and you make it like that. And these work really good. They're cheap. You could get them at Harbor Freight, Home Depot. They're relatively inexpensive. When you're done, you throw them away. Some popsicle sticks, some some good quality paper plates, not that real cheap paper that folds up. These are nice and strong. I'm going to mix the epoxy at this point, get it thoroughly mixed up to 2 parts. Now I mixed a little bit more epoxy than I'm probably going to need. Generally, to do a job like this on this part of it, I would say, with the pre-mix portion, it would have been 2 pumps of each, but I put a third one in because I wanted to make sure I had enough to do the job. Don't epoxy or do more than you can at one time, because in the pot, in the mixture container, you don't want it to start thickening up and curing. So this is ready to go now. Put this over here, and my paintbrush. Now, when I laid the tube on here, the actual wrap stops right here. It's in this direction. So as I put the epoxy on, I'm going to work back in that direction, so that when you're done, it matches the way you've wrapped it, and you won't get any fiberglass binding up on you. When you first get started, make sure you get plenty on the brush, and you'll see as I go along, there's going to be a lot of material on the brush, but don't worry about that. I'm going to start right below the seam. I'm going to put it on. I'll probably go about halfway across. I'll get it in there nice and... Now as you work it in, it'll actually seep itself in and fill in all the weaving. Now on part of this video, you're going to notice that it's going to speed up. So what I want to show you at this point is how to get this part in first, because obviously you're not going to watch the whole video. I mean, it's kind of stupid to see me do the entire job. That's why I'm going to speed it up when I get a little further along. Don't put too much on the brush that you get in trouble with it. See, I'm actually starting to lay it in there pretty thick, and then I'll work it into place. Work yourself left to right or right to left, it doesn't matter, but each piece you do, you want to end up where it's uniform kind of on the bottom. Not that it's all jagged and mixed up. getting that excess material off there. Don't be afraid to put it on. Make sure that you put an ample amount. You don't want so much that it's going to start running and dripping. It will, a lot of the excess will seep into the fiberglass matting. But the one thing that you're going to notice with this type of job is that when you're done, you will have to sand it. It's not like doing it where you're vacuum bagging or using a peel ply type system where a lot of the residual material will pull off. You're going to have to sand it, and that'll be in another part of the video, but I just want to show you at this point what it looks like. So I'm relatively even on the bottom and about, I don't know, maybe 60% across. So you can see I started here, I worked my way down, and I'm going past the edge of the tube, and I'll be doing that on both ends. Okay, so now the rest, a good part of this video now, you'll see that I'm going to speed up the process so you won't have to watch me do every little bits and piece. So at this point we're going to probably speed on through it. This is the portion where we get to the seam, and it takes a little bit more material in there, and you may have to work in it a little harder to get this seam all filled in. But trust me, the epoxy will cure right into it, and you'll see. As you put it on, it may take a little more time to settle in, but it'll get there. That's it. It's all epoxy. I took the little pieces of hair from the paintbrush that got accumulated onto the matting. I got that removed. When it's cured up, we'll cut the ends and we'll show you the next step. But at this point, it's all glass. Not any real runs on it. You don't have to worry. As long as that's not on the major part of the material, there's going to be a little bit of excess here where the seam is, but we'll sand that out later. Looks good. We'll let it sit and cure. I'm using a slow epoxy. It's probably going to take 24 hours to cure. I like to let it sit a couple of days before I sand it. This way, as you sand it with a heavier grit material, it won't load up and start gumming up on you.